When it comes to picking out the best mechanical keyboard switches, the keyword that always pops up is preference, and for good reason. Switches offer both subjective and objective qualities. Without going too deep into things, I would say the most discussed subjective quality is how a switch sounds, and the most discussed objective quality would be how much it costs. How a switch feels can sometimes be a bit of a gray area simply because of how a person perceives smoothness or tactility, as well as based on the batch of switches they have. Combining these aspects lead me to these 4 switches. Hi, I'm Andrew, and today I'd like to talk to you about my favorite linear switches. First, I would like to thank you for stopping by my channel. If this video is at all helpful to you, please like it and comment if there's anything you'd like to add. Also, I would greatly appreciate you subscribing and checking out my other videos if you haven't already. If you're interested in buying switches or other keyboard parts, please use my affiliate link divinity.com/Andrew. Using the link supports me. If you want, you can also use code Andrew to support yourself. Thanks. The first switch that I'd like to talk about is the one that made me love linears, and that's the famous Gateron Black V2. In terms of sound, these tend to be recognized as offering the deepest sound you could ask for in a mainstream linear switch. At around 75 cents a switch, these are the most expensive switches on my favorites list, but I can definitely understand why they're popular. After lube, there are some consistency issues where some switches are noticeably scratchier than others, but after some use, they'll be totally fine. In addition, switch film is optional, but it does help provide a more consistent sound throughout the batch. I'm not a huge fan of the springs as they are a bit heavy for me, so I like to use these with 63.5 gram springs. If you do add film and spring swap, you're looking at around 91 cents a switch. For future reference, I'm using a pack of Duroc springs and Deskey's film as reference points. Duroc springs are currently $9.75 for 100 springs on Divinity. Take the price and divide it by the number of units to get 10 cents a spring. Likewise, for Deskey's film, it's $6.95 for 120 films, so 6 cents per film. The second switch I'd like to talk about is what I consider to be the true budget king of linear switches, and that's the full black variant of the Gator On Yellow, also known as the KS3. In terms of sound, it's surprisingly deep and closest to the ink black of any linear that I've tested so far. At around 20 cents a switch, these are the cheapest switches on my favorites list, and after lube they punch way above their class for what they offer. I've tried 4 Gator On Yellow variants, and the KS3 is without a doubt the smoothest of them all. I did end up filming mine, though you don't have to. As for the spring, I'm perfectly fine with leaving it alone. With the film, you're looking at around 26 cents a switch, which is still insane value. The third switch I'd like to talk about is the Duroc Palm. This is not to be confused with any other JWK or Duroc linear, as it has a mystery blend for the stem material, and the stem pole is slightly longer, which achieves pole bottom out. The sound is deeper than your average Duroc switch, but you also get that crisp bottom out sound, which can be a little clacky depending on the board. At 70 cents a switch, these are right at the ink black price point, but I do find it has some benefits people may not think about. In stock form, the springs are hilariously pingy, while the switch itself is decently smooth. Once lubed, I found these to provide consistent top-tier smoothness. I would definitely consider these buttery smooth. Depending on the vendor, you may be able to find them with factory pre-lube, which is a great option for those of you who don't want to bother with lubing your switches. The pre-lube eliminates most of the ping and offers a decently smooth typing experience over the stock form. It's not nearly as consistent as lubing switches yourself can be, but that's to be expected. The biggest benefit this switch offers over other switches on my favorites list is that it does not need film. The housing is so tight already that if you're not precise with your film installation, you could end up with a janky tactile feeling. The 63.5 gram spring is the perfect weight for me, so this switch ends up staying right at 70 cents a piece. The fourth switch I'd like to talk about is the Cherry MX Black. The ones I have happen to be Hyperglides, given that they were manufactured after November 2019 with new Hyperglide tooling. You may be wondering why in the world I would want to use a Cherry switch when companies like Gateron, Kale, and Duroc have been innovating on the MX design while Cherry kept things the same. Honestly, so did I, until I finally tried some. This is entirely subjective, but what won me over is the sound. I am in love with the high-pitched clackiness and can't get enough. I know some people hate it, but it doesn't bother me whatsoever. These are 45 cents a switch, so it's a little below the average of all the switches I've talked about so far. In stock form, they're noticeably the scratchiest of any switch I've tried. I still haven't bothered lubing or filming just because I want to see if I can break them in with several weeks of use. So far it's been about 2 weeks and I can already tell they're getting better since I have some reference switches to remind me of the scratchiness that I started with. The stock springs are quite inconsistent, with some feeling like 70 gram bottom out and some feeling like 65 gram or even lower. They're also quite pingy, so I bag looped 63.5 gram Duroc springs and swapped those in. With film and replacement springs, you're looking at around 61 cents a switch. Honorable mention goes to the Telios V2. These are a high-pitched sounding switch, though not as high as the Hyperglides. It costs $1.10 a switch, though I paid $1.20 for the turquoise variant because I think they look pretty, and also I could get them with a 63.5 gram spring, whereas the regular Telios only comes in a 67 gram spring. After lube, I would consider the feel to be similar to the Ink Black, which means high levels of smoothness, but not top tier like the Duroc Palm. I did film mine, but again I did not mess with the spring, so the end cost is around $1.26 a switch. If I had bought the regular Telios, it would have been around the same price since I would have added film and changed the spring. I only recommend this switch for those who are after the sound profile. For me, they just don't justify the price point. Aside from the Duroc Palm, you can certainly use any of these switches in stock form, but they will be significantly better with lube. The Palm Linear has a terrible stock spring, so I highly recommend getting the pre-looped ones if you're not going to lube it yourself. And that concludes my favorite linears. What do you think of my list and how does it compare to your favorites? If you're looking for a great linear switch, I don't think you can go wrong with any of the ones I talked about. Also, if you're interested in how they sound, I have a just typing video for each one that I will link in this video's description. That's it for me this time. Take care.